everyone, and welcome back to the Joy-Filled Universe podcast. I am your host, Lisa Ryan, and today I want to talk about something that has been popping up lately in my coaching sessions, and I thought, oh gosh, this is a great topic to discuss this week because it's all about something that quietly shapes how many of us experience our lives, and that is through our identity. And I thought to myself, this could actually be a two-part series because understanding our identity could be a pod in and of itself. However, for this week, I'm going to keep it a little high level from an identity perspective, and I'm going to make a note to dig a little deeper sometime soon, perhaps even next week. Okay? All right. So for today, though, I'm going to say that identity is the lens that we use to interpret our lives. It determines what feels personal, what feels meaningful, and what can even feel a little bit threatening at times. And most specifically, it's what defines us. It answers the question, who am I? Because whether we realize it or not, we are constantly assigning meaning to things in our lives and allowing those things to define our value. Sometimes it's our accomplishments, sometimes it's our relationships, and very, very often, and this is actually pretty understandable too, it can be something that we spend a large percent of our life doing, and that happens to be our jobs. And I'm here to tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with loving what we do. There is nothing wrong with being passionate about our careers, but there is a difference between loving our work and allowing our work to become our identity. And I have personally been in the world of work for a very long time, and I have worked in several professions too, and I have seen firsthand how painful it can be when someone allows their job to define who they are as a human being. Even through my coaching and mentoring, I have worked with many people whose emotional well-being has been deeply impacted by some of their experiences at their professions, at their place of work. For example, I've worked with clients who were these really powerful and smart workhorses. They were like in the office for 10 to 12-hour days, sometimes even working on the weekends. Yet when an opportunity came along, they were overlooked and someone else on the team was the one who got chosen. So when that happened to them, suddenly like the negative defensive thoughts started pouring in, like, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't I good enough? Why didn't they choose me? I'm so mad. I thought that they liked me here. And the list can continue to flow, and the negativity tends to just get worse and worse, and people can really start to spiral. Another example too is I have a mentee who has been working their way up the ladder, and they always had access to like the big boss's calendar. And apparently this access too was very rare. So they felt really relied upon, and they felt trusted and included in conversations, included in all the important meetings. And then one day, out of the blue, something changed. And I can't remember if it was like a leadership shift or roles were reorganized or if someone new had come along and taken part of their responsibilities. I cannot specifically remember that particular piece. However, it was probably a combination of all of the above. And regardless, the end result was that suddenly my mentee no longer had the same access that they once did. And they started to feel less important. They felt undervalued, unseen, and even disliked. And true or not, this is how they felt. And that meant something to them, understandably so. And then one more really quick example, because like I said earlier, this seems to be a thing lately. So one of my clients was feeling really upset because their company had moved to a new building and many of the managers got offices with windows. But my client, yeah, they too were a manager, but they were given an interior office with no window. And that truly rattled them. So somehow, with all of these examples, what appears to be small details can become true measuring sticks for our self-worth. Think about that. A window, an office, calendar access, an invitation to a meeting. These things are not actually measures of our value as human beings. But when our identity becomes intertwined with our job, these things can certainly start to feel like a measure of our worth. And over my many years working across different professions, I have seen this story play out. I've seen people who were so tightly aligned with their jobs that their job was the main way that they described themselves. If you ask them who they were, their answer would immediately begin with their title. Their job came before everything, before their passions, before their hobbies, before their relationships, and then a life change would happen, right? A shift. Maybe they retired. Maybe an uncontrolled circumstance forced them to step away, like an illness or something like that. And then suddenly the role that defined them was gone. And what happened next was heartbreaking to watch because some of these folks really struggled deeply. They felt lost and sometimes tragically experienced a significant decline in their health once their identity disappeared. And here's the part that was probably even more shocking for these folks, because when they looked back on the place that defined them, that corporation, well, it kept going. Almost like a train moving down the tracks, right? When it comes into the station, somebody gets off and then the train starts up again and it continues moving. So when people left their jobs, sure, the people that are left in the workplace, well, they might stumble for a moment. They might have like a period of adjustment, but the system continues. The organization adapts and life moves forward. And that realization can be very sobering because it reminds us that we are more than the roles we play. And if you are someone who can relate to all of this, trust me, because I know how it feels. Remember, we spend a lot of time at work, so it can be extremely easy to allow our roles to become part of who we are and how we identify ourselves. And the reason that I can completely relate is because it happened to me at a point in my life when I experienced a major setback, which I have spoken about before. When that initially happened, I felt like I had to rebuild my professional life from scratch. And I was super determined. I was heads down, eyes on the prize, and I told myself that I was going to be 100% successful. There was no other option. So I poured everything into my career. Now, don't get me wrong, I still had some hobbies and I still had some elements of life outside of work with friends and family and some travel. But if I'm being honest, my job had become one of the primary ways that I defined myself. And around the end of 2016, it was at the beginning of 2017, an opportunity came along and it was my dream job, the one that I was working towards. And spoiler alert, that one I accomplished 5 years later. Yet at that time, I believed that I was ready for the job, and I collected my application package and I submitted it, and I did everything right. I had a couple rounds of interviews. I was super prepared for everyone, and I gave it my absolute best. And then nothing, no phone call, no update, all silence. And months went by. And one day I simply discovered that somebody else was sitting in that position. And that was it. That's how I learned that I had not been the selected candidate. And I was crushed, absolutely crushed. I took several days off from work. I cried. I felt betrayed. I felt overlooked, angry, defeated, unseen, marginalized. All of these emotions were swirling around inside of me. And during that time, I had a very deep and profound reality check that ignited my awareness. I pulled out a tool that is often called the Wheel of Life. It's something that many coaches use. I even use it from time to time with my clients. And so if you don't know what it is, if you could imagine like a round pizza pie and you cut it into triangles, well, those triangles represent different categories. And those categories usually include things like career and relationships, health, personal growth, fun and recreation, spirituality, family, community wealth, service, stuff like that. And so when I looked at my own wheel, honestly, I realized that my career section was thriving, but many of the other areas were only about like a 5 out of 10 when I had to rate them. I had invested so much of my identity into my career that I had unintentionally neglected many other valuable parts of myself. And it was at that moment that I realized if one single category of our lives holds too much of our identity, then anything that threatens that particular category will feel devastating to us. And for me, I learned how dangerous it can truly be when we tie our identity to external roles, because roles change, jobs change, titles change. And because I've been reading a lot of Simon Sinek material lately, I want to share that. He argues that when our identity becomes fused with our role, constructive criticism of the work that we do can feel like it's a criticism of us. Organizational changes can feel deeply personal. And who we are at our core should be bigger than any single role that we play. And I want to say that it is great to be committed to the mission where we work. We also need to be mindful of being detached from our title, because this awareness prevents ego attachment, workplace insecurity, and over-personalizing professional dynamics. And by the way, I just want to add to that, not getting my dream job in 2017 afforded me experiences in my life that were super incredible. So the universe totally had my back, and I am really grateful for the lessons I learned by not being selected as the candidate at that time. So as you can tell in this episode, for the identity perspective, I'm largely focusing on our jobs, and that could be jobs that get paid, and it can also be for jobs that we don't get paid for, like being a parent or playing any role in the family for that matter, being a devoted friend, being a volunteer, serving on a community committee, serving on the school board or local government, or even being a dedicated athlete. I could go on, and the list gets even longer when we add paid positions. And because so many of us dedicate half our lives to our jobs, it can become so easy to allow that to largely define us. So then you might be saying to yourself, well, then how do we create a healthier identity? How do we love our work without becoming defined by it? Personally, when I had my awakening to the fact that my work life was defining who I was, I made a conscious effort to diversify the places where I experienced personal meaning. And my career was absolutely one of those places, but it certainly was not the only place, because as per the Wheel of Life, identity can also be built through like our relationships and creativity, the hobbies that we love and learning, acts of service, personal development and community health, wellness, all of that good stuff, travel, adventure, you name it. And when we balance and thrive in multiple areas of our lives, our identity becomes resilient. And if one area starts to struggle at times, the others will support us during that time until we can get back to balance once again. Another powerful practice that I liked to use, which I got from Mr. Simon Sinek, is learning to define ourselves by values instead of roles. Instead of saying, I am a director, I am a manager, I am a consultant, I am a business owner, we might say, I am someone who values curiosity. I am someone who values kindness. I am someone who loves learning. I'm someone who enjoys helping others grow. It is qualities like that that go with us everywhere because they are not dependent on a job title. And another important step is protecting our identity by remembering that our work is something we do, not who we are. We are the human being who brings energy, creativity, ideas, and passion into the work. But the role itself is just simply one of many places where we express those qualities. And I'm going to go back to when I wasn't selected for my dream job back in the beginning of 2017. It was a true gift for me because I leaned into my relationships with my friends and family and showed up more in those circles, which gave me a sense of loving belonging where I felt valued and treasured. I leaned into my health and wellness. It was shortly after this point that I started running in races and eating out less, and I joined oh God, what was that food prep? Blue Apron. So I could make delicious home cooked meals. I made time to read more and I lost myself for hours in books. I started my run club and I built and enjoyed that whole community of humans who had so much fun physically evolving while having a blast together each and every week. I volunteered my services for causes that were aligned with my heart, and I continued to give my career my best, not my all, but my best. And all of this brought me balance and perspective and worth, value, confidence, joy, and love. And every day felt easier. My job didn't feel heavy. Rather, it flowed for me. And I welcomed opportunities as they came. And I even appreciated when they didn't. It was no longer something that felt negative because it all felt like continuous growth. I became aware of my identity, who I am, how I show up, being proud of being me. And this is who I continue to be today. And it works. And I'll tell you exactly how. Recently, I was given a really awesome growth opportunity at my place of work. However, it meant that I would be moving off of the top floor of the building and I would no longer have one of the best views. And my office would be much smaller. Yet, the work and the people I would get to work with was going to be super exciting. Now, if I was defined by my role, there is no way I would have taken this opportunity. However, because I have an expansive mindset and I am driven by creativity and the joy of continuous growth, I jumped at the chance, and I have been having a really great time, and I am learning and meeting new people, and I feel really proud and excited every day to get to the office. And all of this feels amazing. So for today, before we just wrap it all up, I want to leave you with a question, and I hope you can reflect on it. And it goes something like this. If tomorrow your job title disappeared, if the office, the window, the access to meetings, the recognition, all of it suddenly vanished, who would you still be? What qualities would still define you? And what passions would still exist inside of you? Because with those answers, that is where our real identity lives. And the more we nurture those parts of ourselves, the more stable, confident, creative, open, and grounded we become. Our jobs can be important, our careers can be meaningful, but our identity should always be bigger than our job description. And when we understand that, we begin to live and work from a place of true freedom. And as Maya Angelou has said, people will forget the things that we say, people will forget the things that we do, but they will never forget the way that we made them feel. So when we show up in our true identity, people feel it because it is a high vibe energy of who we are at our core. And the essence we bring into our environments can be super magnetic and certainly very powerful too, in lots of positive ways. And so there we have it, the power of a balanced identity that truly aligns to who we genuinely are at our core. And if you're very curious at all about the Wheel of Life, you can Google the image. There's lots of them would probably come up. And I think Etsy and probably Pinterest too will have a bunch of them. So check it out. It's awesome for affording a really good look into where we are thriving and where we might need just a little bit of focus and attention in our lives. And well, that's going to be a wrap then for this week. And I hope that you found this pod to be helpful. And if you did, please do me a solid and rate, subscribe, review, and share it with a friend. All of this helps me out because it gets the pod out there, which is truly my goal, to reach as many people as possible to raise the vibe in our incredible world. So thank you so much for your support. And on that note, I am your host, Lisa Ryan. This is the Joy-Filled Universe podcast, where we explore all the tools and tricks that are going to make your universe even more joyful than it already is. And I will see you next week. Bye.